right? The time, I guess. Welcome to the Jam.
The Jam Overtime. Well, it's not really overtime. This is
No, it's
the
not
Jam
an overtime. It's just a
special episode.
Yeah, just because we're doing it more than once a week here, I guess.
Yes.
But that's because we want to be timely in our review, even though we're late to the table already. Like all the review channels and we're talking about specifically the Rings of Power. For those listening in,
the Rings of Power up today for today's topic. We're probably going to cover more than just Rings of Power.
I think it'll expand because there's an interesting phenomenon that I've been aware of that I think will be worth talking about. But to start, you want to just tell me what you thought? Just so everyone knows, like, we both watched The Rings of Power and then we didn't discuss it at all. A lot of times we discuss what we're going to talk about beforehand, so we kind of have a sense of what we're going to say to each other. But in this case, we didn't at all. We wanted it to just be fresh and cold.
And we watched both episodes. Both of the episodes that were released
episode 1 and episode
Amazon
2.
Prime.
And just by way of warning, if you're watching or listening, this will include spoilers. We're not going to make any effort to avoid spoilers. We're going to assume you've seen it and then are interested in, and we'll tell you when we start talking spoilers before we start talking.
Ready now.
Well, not quite yet, yeah. Because first what I want to do is just a real general quick overview of what you thought of it. So what'd you think of it?
I enjoyed the second episode much more than the first episode.
Okay.
So the second episode was pretty good. The first episode was slower.
As a general thumbs up, thumbs down type thing, you give it a thumbs up though, currently?
So far, yes. I mean, it's a thumbs up because I think they're doing pretty well with it so far, but there are some things that I definitely don't like. So.
Okay.
So it's generally
enough,
a thumbs up.
I'm glad to hear that. It sounds like you're aligned with my thinking. Sounds like we got it about the same way, which is great because like I said, I've had some thoughts that I wanted to talk about that aren't necessarily about the Rings of Power, but they were based on the idea that I didn't hate it. And that is kind of exactly my thinking. Is overall I'd give it a thumbs up. If I was giving it a rating on out of 10, 6.5 maybe, 7.
I'm probably in the 6 area.
Yeah, 6 area.
I'm not even going to go to 7 yet. Nope.
But part of the reason why it's only a 6 or a 7 is because of the legacy that it has to live up to, right? Because it's Lord of the Rings. It's supposed to be Lord of the Rings. If this was just an original series, I'd probably rate it a little higher.
I wouldn't think anything of it, as a matter of fact. But I think you pointed something out that I thought about earlier today, and that is the legacy that they have to live up to, the standard that Peter Jackson set with Lord of the Rings. That's what this whole thing was hyped up to be. It was hyped up to be a prequel to the movies, and yet so much was changed.
Right. Well, and even if you put Peter Jackson aside, just the legacy of Lord of the Rings, it was incredibly popular before the movies. Peter Jackson had a lot to live up to, and did an incredible job of living up to that.
Peter Jackson,
now it's like you have to doubly live up.
Yeah, Peter Jackson lived up to it and then went way beyond and just completely blew everything before that out of the water.
All right. Like the Rankin Bass cartoons that we were talking about before we started.
Yes, the cartoons. Yeah, I only saw The Hobbit. They used to play The Hobbit when I was in grade school, and we would watch those, and it was awesome. I think I saw those like 2 or 3 times, and we always wanted to watch them. If our teachers gave us, like in the 3rd grade, if our teachers gave us a choice of what we wanted to watch, it was always The Hobbit. Hobbit was funny. Awesome. Yeah.
And I haven't seen him that many, but I do remember seeing him as a kid. And so, I checked him out. It's been years now, but I pulled up clips on YouTube and was watching parts of it, and they're really very rough. They're not as good as I remember them as a kid. They kind of, as a kid, I think I enjoyed them more.
No, you see things through kids' eyes and it changes a whole lot. But what I do remember when I saw Fellowship of the Ring, when they first showed the kind of the silhouette of Gollum in the very beginning, when Galadriel is telling the story of the history of the ring, and she's talking about when Gollum came to find the ring, and you see this silhouette of Gollum on the rock in the cave, and he's holding onto the ring, and he's saying, "My precious." Right. And then he looks up, and I do not remember a whole lot at all about the cartoons when I was a kid. But what I remember was that when I first saw that part of the prologue, that I was like, "Holy cow, that was Gollum!" Like, it was everything that I remembered Gollum was supposed to be.
Gollum was done really well. I agree. Yeah.
Yes.
And even though they changed him, because in that one there was some differences, and like when it shows his eyes in Moria when he's following him, in the Fellowship, he looks different there than he did.
He does look different than he does in Two Towers. Yeah.
And in Two Towers, it's actually, I think, better. I think they improved it, in the changes they made and stuff. But
they did.
But yeah,
I think so.
All right, so we're probably moving into spoiler territory now a bit. So fair warning.
Cover your
if you haven't
ears.
seen
Turn
it,
off
and you don't wanna,
Yep.
If you
turn
don't
off
want
your
spoilers,
YouTube.
and maybe we won't hit too many spoilers, but we're not going to be careful moving forward. So,
Nope.
What did you specifically have criticisms of? I guess would be my first question.
Okay, so you called it. You called out that with Galadriel, that they were going to make her as a Mary Sue, somebody who is just naturally good at everything without ever seeing the evolution of how she got that good. And it was almost immediately that it happened. So the whole thing, at the very beginning of the first episode, she's a little girl. She's got a good relationship with her brother. You can tell that she's very close with her brother. And then the next thing you know, her brother goes off to war to fight Sauron. And, was it Sauron or Morgoth? It was Sauron, right? And
correct.
And then he is eventually killed. His now grown-up sister.
Sorry. We should clarify just in case. The first battle where it showed him fighting,
was that Morgoth?
Where there was the dragons, that was in the war against Morgoth.
Okay.
And then it kind of just cut immediately to him. It says then he chased down Sauron, and he was dead. Yeah. Spoiler.
Okay.
Spoiler warning.
So it was. All right. So he's dead, and so she's now leading this company of elven soldiers to find Sauron. They're way up north, and they come in contact with that snow troll. And immediately the snow troll is just having his way with all of the male elven soldiers. And the only one that is completely capable of taking down the troll with almost no effort, just with some cool acrobatics, was Galadriel. And it already set the tone that this was going to be exactly what you said it was going to be.
So I think that's really interesting, because that is not one of the criticisms I had. I did not
I criticize it.
Well, let me be clear. I do criticize that scene, but it's not because of the Mary Sue nature of it. Because one of the things that I read into it, or I took away from it, is that when she's fighting that troll, that represents perhaps centuries of having done such, where she decided to take up her brother's cause, and then she's been hunting and fighting and hunting for decades at least, maybe centuries.
So does that mean that all of the other elven soldiers were just rookies?
I see that criticism,
because they were
did,
all
and
hunting.
My wife complained about that. Yeah, she complained about how they and I've
all
heard,
of them were hunting Sauron for centuries. It says, she talks about it in her narrative. They were hunting Sauron for centuries. Even when
Yeah.
they're climbing the mountain, they're all climbing this mountain. They've got their ice picks and all that. They're climbing up, and all of the males are like really struggling to get up this mountain. And Galadriel's like 50 feet above them on the face of this cliff.
Sure, but that was more to represent
Her
her
resolve.
ambition. Yeah, like she was so dedicated and committed to it, whereas they were getting sick of it and like, what are we even doing anymore? So that,
She wanted revenge,
okay.
and I kind of got that, but still at the same time, it's like you've got all of these male elves, but she is the one that's outdoing all of them. She's outpacing them all. She's out fighting them all. And one thing that we know from elves is they're supposed to live for very, very long periods of time. So, or forever if they don't die in battle, right?
and so they're supposed to be very agile and very strong and capable.
Very agile and very strong, and that's what you don't see on the cliff. You see them actually struggling, and Galadriel's the only one that's just taking this thing on like no big deal. She's
So-
like as good as Legolas, but she's a female.
I can accept that as a criticism of the feminist messaging, I guess, a little bit. What I don't think it was, though, still is that it wasn't necessarily Mary Sue. The Mary Sue implication of that criticism implies that she's able to be better without any effort, and I don't think that was necessarily the message. I think there was an implication that she had put in the dedication and the effort.
Where?
But yeah, you're right.
Where? Because they showed none of it.
The other elves with her should have been better at what they were doing. And my wife complained about that too. She was like, they're just standing around and getting beat up, and
They're getting beat up by this troll, and then Galadriel comes on, and she just does a couple of jumps and whips and whatever, and
Well, and my
takes this
broader
guy down.
complaint of that scene, as I said, I did have a problem with that scene, was the fact that the guy puts down his sword onto the ground, and she runs and springs off his sword, and he throws he throws her with his sword. And just like that in and of itself, I was like, are you kidding me? That's dumb. Like it just, and then, yeah, like, I don't know. It went a little too far. It was, the way I said it to my wife is it was like they went a little too far with the too many flips approach to it. You know, like with Yoda fighting.
Yeah.
The Yoda fighting style, where it's like just
any Jedi fighting from the prequels on has been stupid.
It's too much, yeah.
It's way too much.
They did. It wasn't that bad, but they did go. It was a little bit too much. That they're trying too hard to make it cool. And so it wasn't terrible though. Like I didn't walk away from it rolling my eyes, being like, oh my gosh, that was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. It was just a little bit like, yeah, okay, that wasn't ideal, but it's okay. And the troll. The special effects was cool. I liked the troll. He looked cool.
The troll was awesome because we hadn't seen a snow troll before. So seeing that difference between them and the trolls in the South was pretty cool. But then you move on to to that thing about the guy helping her along with his sword. It was extremely feminist. Like the guy now is just thrusting the woman into the forefront because the woman's better than everybody else. And yes, it's Galadriel, but another thing that really bothered me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One thing that really bothered me though, so you didn't see any of that evolution. We didn't see anything where Galadriel had ever practiced fighting in any way whatsoever.
They just implied it.
They just implied it, and it implies in the show that she takes up this task because she wants revenge. That's it. There's nothing else about being trained in those types of things, and even in the Lord of the Rings movies, there is no female elf that actually takes up the sword. The only one was Arwen.
And I just realized I have my speakers on. I better make sure they're off.
She was the only one that did that, and it was kind of cool because she's like, you could tell she had some sort of training, but by and large it was all male elves. And so what I
Well,
what
and
what
then
what
sorry.
upsets, it doesn't upset me that a female is doing this. What upsets me is that this is now a drastic change from the originals. Now in The Hobbit, when Galadriel takes on Sauron,
That's
she
what I was
doesn't do
just
it.
going to mention.
She doesn't do it with a sword. She
Yeah,
does it.
exactly.
She
That was
shows.
exactly what I was.
She
Is that what the?
shows her. Yeah,
Yeah.
she shows her big power. And it shows that she's a very powerful elf. And we don't get any sort of sense of that whatsoever in the first two episodes. Anyway, you don't.
Which I don't. Yeah, and that's okay because maybe she develops into that power and gets it later and stuff. So we'll just have to wait and see on that. But I agree. Yeah, it's setting her up as this great sword fighter, great, um, combatant. And then yeah, exactly. We just barely watched that in The Hobbit, that scene where she takes on Sauron, or as
And
they
it was
say it in the
awesome.
new show, Sauron.
Yeah, and it was an awesome, awesome scene. That was really well done. I loved it, despite
Right, but it's got Elrond and Saruman are doing all the fighting,
right.
and to be fair, that's partially because she was exhausted and struggling with other things and stuff, so they were doing the fighting. But yeah, they didn't set her up as a great swordsman or anything there.
No, she in the films, she is very graceful. She's extremely poised in her posture and the way that she speaks. She's very commanding in the way that she speaks. You can tell that everybody has incredible respect for her. And in this, they treat her kind of like, you better do what your king says, or you're going to be out of favor. And obviously
Right,
we don't know the history of that. So my
she can
second
grow into that. Yeah. So
yeah, my second big criticism is this is where they strayed completely from the standard that was set by the Peter Jackson films. And again, they came in to say this is a prequel to the Peter Jackson films, yet almost all of the male elves have short hair.
oh,
Like
interesting.
her
Yeah, that
brother
doesn't
had
bother me.
her brother had hair like yours. It was very short,
Right.
and it does bother me because in all of the films,
It's
all of
so
the
it's such a
male
different time
elves.
though. So
Oh, come on! They showed Elrond when he was fighting Sauron in the beginning of Fellowship of the Rings, and he had long hair.
yeah, but
All of the male
I don't know.
elves
Doesn't
had
bother me.
long hair, every single one of them. So that upsets me because I don't
See, I don't
want to
think
see,
that's worth being upset about.
I don't want to see elves that look like dudes today. That's my point. I don't. This
Right.
is
I could see
this is supposed to
that
be
kind
set
of.
way a long time ago. So I don't want to see guys that are fashionable to today's standards. Did they do that because they just want chicks to fall in love with them? I think they do pretty well with that. With if they got long hair, right?
I don't know. What a girl's like. Who knows? But yeah, that doesn't bother me. Yeah, so one thing I was going to say earlier when you were talking about um, the grace and the character of um,
Galadriel.
Galadriel in the original, in the Peter Jackson ones, I actually really liked how right at the very, very start, when there was the little girl version of Galadriel in Rings of Power, seriously in the first like 3 minutes, they did a shot where she was making that little boat thingy,
Yeah.
and the kids are kind of calling to her, and it does this close up shot of the side of her face, and she looks over towards them, and it was mimicking exactly the way that
It was a slight resemblance, wasn't it?
yeah, it was mimicking the way
To
that
Kate
she did the
Blanchett.
same. Kate
Yes,
Blanchett did the same
yeah.
thing with Frodo. I thought it was cool, actually. I was like, yeah, that's cool. That worked. So I liked that.
Yeah.
Um,
So, and then
Yeah.
so the other thing was, okay, so you've got
Short
the
hair.
male elves, the short hair, but
Yeah.
then you've got the black elf who's watching over that village of men, and his hair is completely short, like it
Right, it
just
buzzed,
hugs the
yeah.
side. Yeah, it's very, very close to today's standards. So that bothered me. Other than that, I thought he himself carried He carried himself very much like an elf, and I really like that. A lot of
Right.
the other elves in the show, they didn't seem elvish to me. Like in the movies,
Okay.
when the elves, when they walked, when they talked, they walked quite slowly, just very gracefully.
Right. There's
They
definitely a
were very
demeanor.
poised. Yes, they
And
held themselves high, and he was the only one that I thought that carried himself that way.
they very clearly made some effort to make those demeanors match with the other races, even though they wasn't perfect. So the idea, I think, is that the Harfoots are the predecessors of hobbits that become hobbits
Yes.
someday.
Right.
And there was definitely, in the way they moved, the way they talked, the way that their accents were, you could see some resemblance there. And it wasn't exactly the same, but I think that was okay. And then the same thing with the dwarves. The dwarves had their dialect and the way that they moved and the way they talked. There was definitely some continuity there where they were making an effort. They were clearly making an effort to make it similar.
Yes.
And
Now,
so, yeah, interesting.
yeah, my biggest complaint about the dwarves, and this goes back to the Hobbit, is that he totally changed what dwarves look like in the Hobbit.
Yeah.
In the Lord of the
Not
Rings,
totally, but yeah. Yeah,
well, the
changed.
dwarves didn't look like they did in the Hobbit. So they in the Hobbit they all had very large noses. They and they kept with that in this, and so for that, it doesn't really bother me quite as much. But in the Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, and Return of the King, like Gimli himself, he didn't really have a big nose like they do in The Hobbit, and but they do carry that tradition on. What did bother me though,
Well, not all of them in The Hobbit do. You know, some of them, they look very almost just human.
well, when do the female dwarves get beards? Because that was one of the things in the Two Towers, at least in the extended edition, that that all of the females looked like the men because they had beards. And even in the Hobbit movies, you saw Gimli's the little picture, the portrait of Gimli's mother, and she had hair on the side of her, like she had little lamb chops going on.
So the wife of Durin had that too. She had hair growing here.
I didn't see it. I thought she was
It
completely.
was subtle, but it was there. Yeah.
I did not see it. Yeah, at all.
Yeah.
I didn't see it at all. She was
Yeah,
very.
I'd noticed that. So Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So I wondered if they were going to do that. And again, they just seemed too modern. The way that the way that Durin's wife particularly behaved herself, the way she spoke, she seemed way too modern.
I was
like she was
expecting
just a
to really
grandmother.
be annoyed by her because she's one of the ones that's made a lot of the sanctimonious comments about.
I was annoyed by her.
garbage. And I wasn't as annoyed as I expected to be. So maybe it's because I
was.
went in anticipating to be more annoyed than I was. You know what I mean?
I didn't read any
yeah.
of the comments. I didn't read any of the comments, so I have absolutely no idea what any of them said. But she annoyed me,
Right.
and mostly because it was too modern. I would like to have seen. I would like to have seen them do something with the female dwarves where they were just more subtle versions of the males.
Yeah. Even
Because
in
they're
today's
dwarves.
culture, you'd be behind that.
Well, I don't mean behind them as in subservient to them. I'm talking about.
No, I mean, making them, like
Well,
with
they
the,
didn't
with the,
seem
the
dwarf.
trans issue and stuff.
She didn't
where
seem dwarvish. She didn't seem dwarvish. I don't care about today's politics. That's so stupid for them to do anything because of today's politics.
Well, my point is, I'm surprised they didn't dig further into it and make her more masculine than they did. Just because I would think that would be a way that they'd socially message, and they didn't really. I mean, it was okay in that regard.
They should have, because at least that would have been, they would have had that
excuse. It was an excuse that they could have gotten away with it because it's in
would have been. They would have had that continuity with the films. So, So that bothered me,
Right.
but I did actually really enjoy the whole breaking of rocks thing. That just the way that the dwarves were underground, the
So just
scenery.
for those, well, no, we've already said spoilers, so people have seen it,
Yeah,
hopefully.
this
So
the
I was going to
scenery.
describe what you were talking about just in case, but if you're watching this and you haven't seen it yet, um, too bad. Go watch it. You'll figure out what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
so the scenery and the graphics of the Misty Mountains was phenomenal. The
I
Moria
think it
looked
was great, yeah.
fantastic. It was
And
so well done.
and even some of the things that I've seen complaints about with the effects, I didn't have a problem with really. I for the most part, there's a few decisions they made that I feel were problematic. Like for example, we already talked about the fight with the troll, the snow troll. There's a few other things like that they're not ideal and stuff. But for the most part, that's not a special effects problem. It's not a look and feel thing. It's more just a choice in the way that they approach things that I have problems. But yeah, for the most part, I just think like one of the things they complained about a lot is the shot where she jumps up and stabs her knife into the ice, and the camera's above her looking down. And I've heard people complaining that looks that doesn't look good and doesn't look fake. So I watched it a second time this yesterday morning. I watched the first episode again before I watched the second episode, and so I was paying more attention after I'd watched some of those reviews and stuff, and so I was paying closer attention to see if is this a problem, and I can kind of see the point that people complain about it, but not really. Like it was fine. Like it didn't bother me at all.
Well, I think what people have to understand is, for the most part, this is a television show. This is not a blockbuster.
I know, but the money that they put
Film.
into it, it may as well be a blockbuster
Well,
movie.
it's Amazon. I mean, they have the money to put into it. But I mean,
it was an expensive show.
yeah. So they go into
But it
the
looks
caves.
great. I think it looks great.
I didn't like the entrance to Moria quite as much. I thought that the walls of Moria were much larger in Fellowship of the Ring. And
Well, yeah, but which entrance was it? Because there could be multiple entrances, and maybe this was just
it
one
looked
of them,
like it
right?
was close to it though. So anyway, they go
Right.
in, and just from the beginning, when they open the doors to Moria and you start to see these dwarves, and they've got those metal head, the masks and the helmet things on, and that was really cool, I thought, because
Right.
it's something that we hadn't seen before, but it worked. And then you start going through, and they're doing this long walk through the mines of Moria, and they are showing things that we didn't get to see in Fellowship of the Ring. Like they're gardening underground, and it shows them how they get their sunlight and how they're able to grow their gardens, and then all the bridges that they had, all of the buildings, the waterfalls, the grass, the trees underground.
It's cool looking, yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought it was really well done. Yeah, it reminded me of Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, when they're underground.
Oh, right, the underground, yeah, that they build.
Yeah, it totally reminded me of that.
What else did you like? What were your other?
I did like the Harfoots. I thought they were pretty
Did ya?
awesome. Again, there were some things about it though that was just like, where are the men? There's one guy. It's the guy that runs the village, and her
It's very
dad,
female centric.
and Nori's dad. That's it. Everyone else is a female, and it's like all the major characters there are female. So that bothers me. It bothers me because they are setting a standard. Same thing in the Village of Men, where you had the female who is, you can
Kind of
tell
the main
yeah,
person.
she's in love with
that
the,
one doesn't
the
bother
elf.
me because it's clearly set up for the romance between the elf, and so.
Well, it bothers me
that one,
because
I'm okay that she's the central character there because that's kind of the obvious storyline.
yes, sort of. So she kills. I don't know what that was that she killed. Was that a goblin?
I think it was just an orc,
she
yeah,
kill?
or a goblin, yeah.
Yeah, so
But
that
it
was
was more
another
in the
thing.
style of the. It was more in the style of the original, Lord of the
The
Rings,
original, yep,
which
Lord of
was
the Rings.
cool.
I loved
Yeah.
the orcs, even in the battle that they had with Morgoth. All of the orcs looked like they were real people in makeup and costume,
Yeah.
and I like that. I was one of my biggest criticisms of the Hobbit films
Of the
is
Hobbit films, yeah. The
all of
CGI stuff.
yeah, they were all CGI, and it was
Yeah.
horrible. I couldn't stand it. I hated it.
Okay. One of the things that I liked the best because it excited me was the ending of the first episode because of the appearance of what is very obviously and clearly going to be one of the Maiar. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I might not be. One of the wizards. And probably Gandalf, right?
Well, I think it's clear that it's Gandalf.
But
To me, it
could
was.
be Radagast or something. It could be one of the others.
I don't
It
know.
could be Saruman even, right? Like I don't know,
I
but
think Saruman was always Saruman the White, wasn't he? He was always the head of the order.
all the five Maiar that were sent to Middle Earth were sent to combat the forces of Sauron. They were sent, they were made incarnate and sent to Middle Earth for that purpose. So that includes Saruman.
But I mean,
So
what I'm saying is Saruman was always Saruman the White. He was the head of the order. So, but you could tell.
there's two things about that. One is that I'm not sure that that's detailed out. Maybe I could be wrong on that, but I'm not sure if it is. But secondly, even if it is, like in the Silmarillion or something, they don't have the rights to the Silmarillion, so they're making stuff up. So whatever they're doing with this particular character may or may not be in sync with what Tolkien actually had in mind or what he wrote. And that's true of kind of a lot of the stuff they're doing. They're basically basing it on the Peter Jackson shows. And then I think they have rights to like the appendix in the books. But they don't have rights to the Silmarillion and they don't have rights to some of the other histories. So they're doing their own thing to an extent. And so in that regard, even if you're right, it still could be Saruman that they've decided to do, but I think you're right. I think it's Gandalf.
I think it's Gandalf. Yeah,
And it was just cool. It was exciting, like that idea of how Gandalf came into the world and becomes Gandalf. I was like, ooh, that's cool. I thought it was cool.
Yes, very much, and because that's something we didn't get to see. We never even heard about it in the Lord of the Rings films or the Hobbit films, is how he came to Middle Earth. I thought it was kind of cool to see the Greyhavens and see them portrayed, the way they were portrayed, the way that they moved to and from the Greyhavens. I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah, overall, I liked the idea. Some of that didn't make a lot of sense to me. They're just, and these would be nitpicky things that once again
there wasn't a lot of story behind it. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of information.
Just like okay, they decided to send the these warriors that had spent a long time searching for Sauron. They decided to give them reprieve to go back to the Greyhavens. Why don't they send everybody back to the Greyhavens if it's paradise? Why, like, if the reason they came to Middle Earth was to fight against the sources of Sauron, and now they believe that's been defeated, why doesn't everybody go back? And then secondly, which I know I understand, they had some dialogue where the king actually believes there is, maybe some reality to it. But either way, just like as a general rule, why doesn't everybody go back? And then, if the need comes to return or whatever, I don't. And how does that even work? Can they, if they go to the Greyhavens, can they ever come back, or is it like going to heaven and you're just, it's like
to
dying?
me, it certainly. I think they implied that once they went to the Greyhavens, that was where they were going to stay.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is the implication in the original. And keep in mind, I don't think either of us are Lord of the Rings. We're that big of nerds where we're experts on the way everything works and stuff. So. Yeah.
Well, to me, it's not in keeping with the films, because there were a lot of references in the films to the time of men, the time of the elves, those kinds of things. And when they said the time of the elves at the very end of Return of the King,
the time of the elves is over. Yeah.
When they said the time of the elves is over, it's
coming to an end, I think is the phrase.
I think they said over. And Elrond was speaking to others, and he would say, the time of the elves is coming to an end. He's telling that to Gandalf. But at the end of Return of the
Right.
King, he says the time of the elves is over. The time of men is just beginning, or it is now
Right.
time for men. And so when they send them back to the Grey Havens, I thought, now wait a minute, this is supposed to be the time of the elves. And they're
Yeah.
supposed to have
Yeah.
a very strong presence in Middle Earth.
Which,
And
yeah. But yeah, and that's part of exactly like there was just things like that where it's like, why are they sending just and there's sort of an implication, okay, that this is a special reward for these warriors that have sacrificed so much, and so they're getting this special reward. But yeah, there's some confusion there, and then also they're sailing to the Grey Havens, and so they have all these warriors they're being prepped in a ceremonial fashion and all that sort of stuff to then go to the Grey Havens and then never return. But then the servants who are prepping them
where are they?
are also going to the Grey Havens to never return.
We saw
Are they being
that.
rewarded too, or did they just coincidentally get rewarded because they're the
Yes.
servants?
They
Or
appeared they appeared out of nowhere.
it was just
and
kind
then-
of a little bit like
and then
I'm
they
not sure what's going
disappeared.
on.
Well, no, I mean they appeared out of nowhere, then they disappeared.
Well, I think they were there. You probably just didn't see them. I think they're just standing in the very back of the boat. Because
Maybe
when I
'cause
watched
they
the
all look
second
the
time,
same.
I noticed them. They're just kind of standing in the back of the boat, just standing there.
Oh, so they were all
Um,
yeah, okay.
But yeah, it was just kind of like, I don't know. I wasn't clear on that and stuff. And once again, that is not a complaint that made me think the movie made me think the show was dumb or something. It just was one of those things that I was a little bit like, I wonder
There
about
was some
that.
confusion. It was confusing.
And there
So
were a lot
that-
of little things like that, little things that were just kind of like, oh, that could have been a little more clear, or that could have been done better, or whatever like that. But none of it was egregious enough that I was like, this is dumb and I don't like this. So
No, I didn't. I wasn't really disappointed in those things. I just thought, okay, whatever. But another thing that kind of bothers me is in the films, there was in the narration there would be talk of what age of Middle Earth it was. Gandalf would read stuff from what's the dude that cut off the hand of Saruman's hand, or Sauron's hand, Isildur.
oh,
And Isildur talks about what age it is when he's reading the things in Fellowship of the Ring that Isildur wrote, and it mentioned what age it was. They also mentioned what age it was in the very beginning of Fellowship of the Ring, and at the end of Return of the King, it was the end of the Third Age and the beginning of the Fourth Age. So we had those things, and we've seen none of that so far in this.
I thought there was a mention of that at one point, but it's definitely not as prominent.
Yeah, and honestly, if there
I don't
was
know, I
mention, it's forgetful because I don't remember seeing it.
Right. I don't pay much attention to that sort of stuff anyway. My ADD brain is like whatever. Dates,
I do because
history.
it's all continuity. So, but anyway,
Yeah.
but by and large, I really enjoyed the second one a lot more than I did the first one, the first
Well,
episode.
and yeah, I was going to ask because you said that that you felt the first one was a little slower, and I was really engaged with the first one because it was intriguing. It's like, what are they doing here? What's gonna happen, and what's the implication here? And just that sense of curiosity kept me really engaged. I finishing the first one. I had more of a sense of satisfaction in that regard than I did on the second one. The second one was good and I enjoyed it. It was more just like, moving into, okay, now we're into the story and things are starting to develop. But the first one had that sense to me of really kind of opening up the questions in an interesting way that I thought was pretty cool. So I actually didn't have that sense that it was slow.
Yeah, what bothered me more about the first episode was there wasn't enough background. There wasn't
I see
enough.
that as a legitimate argument for sure.
There wasn't enough background to explain what was going on. So, if you compare the prologue in Fellowship of the Ring, it was like a 10-minute prologue, right?
But it was really succinct, displaying
it was
Yeah.
extremely well done, and the storytelling of Kate Blanchett, her ability to tell that story with was really intriguing, and you didn't get any of that.
I think they could have done a better job with that. Yeah, I agree.
They absolutely could have. They could have at least explained some things. I mean, the Galadriel explaining what was going on. And this just hit me. Galadriel was the one who did the prologue in Fellowship of the Ring to explain the whole history. Yep. And Galadriel is in the Rings of Power explaining the history of things, but she definitely does not have Kate Blanchett's touch.
No, but it's not bad. Yeah, it's not bad. But yeah, like one of the worst things in that regard was one we already mentioned, but we'll mention again is because we just mentioned it before, and as a critique though, the fact that her brother is fighting this battle and it's showing visual of her fighting the battle, but then it just cuts to then her brother, and it's totally in voiceover says then my brother went after Sauron, but now he's dead. You know, it just told you that, and the yes. visual that you got with that is just her brother lying on the slab dead, and so it didn't. I understand maybe they didn't want to show something because they don't want you to know yet exactly what happened, but it still felt a little sudden and a little jarring, where it's just like it's explaining things with a visual, you know, behind the dialogue, just like it does in the movies. But then it cut to it and was like a little, yeah, it didn't just play happened, as well.
So, I thought. Yeah, it took away the emotion for sure. Because you like her brother. He's kind of cool.
The visuals, even if they were trying to keep this the secret, they could have done something like showed her getting news and falling to her knees, and then showed her brother being carried in, and you know they could have added more visual than just him lying on a slab, I guess.
Yes,
you know.
I agree. And
so,
and well,
I don't know.
And one of the things that I did notice was they tried to make Sauron's armor and helmet look like, or his crown look like it did in Lord of the Rings.
Similar enough that it was very obvious, yeah.
It was similar, but it was not exact. And that kind of bothered me because I wanted, if they're going to show Sauron, it's like Darth Vader. So you've got Darth Vader in the original trilogy, and you can tell there's a certain look about the helmet. Then they move in to Darth Vader in the prequels when Anakin becomes Darth Vader, and it's like it's bigger, it's fatter, the helmet is, and it's symmetric. It's too symmetrical.
So this ties into what I want to talk about. So
so I would like to have seen them really mimic Darth Vader. So in that you had in these sequel Star Wars movies, they did not have access to any of the C-3PO costumes. They weren't allowed to use a C-3PO costume to make molds. They had to be recreated completely from scratch by the crews in England, and they did a phenomenal job recreating C-3PO. And I wish that they would have done the same thing here with Sauron.
So, okay, I accept the critique generally, and like one of the things that I don't like, for example, is when they took away Superman's red briefs, because Superman, forever and a day, blue leotard with red briefs. The yellow S on his cape, it bothers me even more that they removed that. I love the yellow S on his cape. I understand there's a little bit of cheese factor with the red, you know, wearing his underwear on the outside sort of thing. But still, that was Superman. And so when they changed that, there's a level where I understand sort of the you know, you want it to be what it is and not changed. But there is a level, and this is the discussion I wanted to have when we opened up. So I don't know if have you seen any of the critiques or reviews on Rings of Power yet?
And I don't
care. That's kind
of
what I thought. Yeah. So I follow, you know, I kind of follow a certain group of reviewers and stuff that review that, you know, nerd stuff, I guess you might call it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And man, they hate it. Like they hated Lord of the Rings. Like the vitriol is intense and extreme. They
Rings of Power
hate
or
it.
Lord of the Rings?
Rings of Power.
No, you said Lord of the Rings.
Sorry, yeah, I meant Rings of Power.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of them that I haven't watched a lot of them because when I was watching it, I'd only watched one episode and I didn't want spoilers from the second episode yet. But I did watch through part of one. Are you familiar with Shad Diversity? The YouTube channel. This is the guy's named Shad. And he's his channel, his main channel, Shadiversity, he does medieval weaponry as his channel. But he also has this second channel that he does with a group called Night's Watch. And I enjoy it. It's fun to watch. And they do kind of like what this episode is for us. They do commentary on, but they do it consistently. Like they comment on all the pop culture, movies and stuff. And so their review, first of all, it was 2.5 hours of a YouTube video on the first episode alone, with pages and pages and pages and pages of critical notes that they'd taken. And so he gets into it, and I didn't even watch the whole thing because it started actually getting annoying pretty quick, which I usually enjoy them pretty well. But
I could not watch 2.5 hours of a review.
Yeah. Anyway, so the first thing that he critiques is he says in the beginning they have this line where they say, there was a time when the world was young and there hadn't even been and evil didn't exist yet. And then I think the line is, and the world was so young that there hadn't even been a sunlight yet or a sunset yet. Now I'm not quoting that right, but that's the basic
sunrise.
idea, right?
There hadn't been a sunrise.
There hadn't been a sunrise yet. And then he went off and just started rampaging about these lines and how terrible they were because there was a lack of continuity between the ideas of evil not being in the world and there not being a sunrise yet. And seriously, it was just like after a couple of minutes of him yelling at the camera, and usually I like him yelling at the camera. That's part of the charm, right? Is that he kind of goes on these rage, against things. But this was just so like nonsense thing to even be complaining about, that I was just like, if this is going to be this whole review, I'm just not interested. And the fact that they had 3 pages of critiques and had started before that talking about how terrible this show was. Like it was just such a terrible show and horrible, horrible, horrible. And I'd watched it and enjoyed it and thought this was pretty good. And then the other thing you see is these people, calling you apologetic leftists if you liked the show, which neither you or I are apologetic leftists. I'm a little bit more apologetic than you on some things, but I'm still very, very conservative and very, very much, not, we don't like the social justice stuff. We don't like all those sorts of things. And I didn't like that in the show. I think the social justice, the equity stuff that they did with racial stuff in it was a mistake. But I can, let go of it and not worry about that, and just, not let it offend me so bad that I'm like hating the show. So I wanted to talk about and ask you, because there is this level of serious hatred that is kind of consistent with pop culture in these sorts of things that doesn't seem legitimate to me. Like hatred beyond the reality of the problems of a show. And is it because it's their job to be critics, or what they consider their job to be, and so they're just being ultra critical? Is it because internet culture just leads to that sort of thing? Is it because they're just so biased against everything going on that they cannot see past? You know what? I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that even, or is it just?
So I think that people take it too seriously.
Well, and that's always been the case with nerd, pop
people
culture,
people
nerd
take it
culture.
way too seriously. But here again, though, how I feel about Star Wars.
Right, you tend to be more extreme that way about Star Wars.
They screwed it up, but it was because it was something that we grew up with as children. We didn't grow up with the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings, and honestly, that's almost all I know about Lord of the Rings is because of Peter Jackson. And I started reading the books, and I did read The Hobbit after the movies came out. Not the Hobbit movies, but Lord of the Rings movies. I did read them, and I'm almost done with the Two Towers. And the thing that really struck me, the difference between the books and the films, was the books are okay. They are extremely detailed. They're not really exciting to me. The Harry Potter books are
Or better
really
than the
exciting.
movies.
They are
Yeah, yeah.
so exciting to read.
It's yeah. J.R.R. Tolkien's prose, um, when it was translated to the scene, to the screen rather, was rendered in a way that was exciting and good, even though it was really realistically a lot of the dialogue straight from the books. But when you read it just as dialogue in the books,
There's no
I guess you have to
emotion.
have a better imagination than me for adding excitement to that prose.
You do,
'Cause,
and
yeah,
but yeah, it did bother
I
me
still
about
love
that
them,
in the
but
books.
yeah,
So I fell in love with the movies from the very beginning. I mean, that part where Galadriel is speaking Elvish, that was it for me. I mean, as
right.
soon as they start doing that and she starts going through, they were so masterfully done. And I even criticized Peter Jackson for doing such a horrible job with the Hobbit films. He rushed through everything. He didn't try.
He took on more
He
than he should have too,
he
making it
took on
three
more than he
movies.
should have, but at the same time, he he didn't try. Like he cut corners. There was bad emotion. The amount of times that Thorin would yell, and the same yell, "Hurrah!" whatever he would do to get the elves' attention or the dwarves' attention, to get them to stop bickering, whatever it was, he did the same exact yell throughout all three films. And then you had him, how many times did he say, "Do not speak to me of this or that,"
Right.
or whatever? It was like, Thorin,
Do
if
not
you took
speak to me
away
of
those
this.
two things, I don't think Thorin would have said much in the films. So it really bothered me that
Thorin was not likable as a character.
he was not
I'm not
likable
sure
at
it was meant
all.
to be though, so I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, it bothered me. So there were a lot of things in the Hobbit films that I just absolutely couldn't stand. He just did not do that well with it. But then you go back to Lord of the Rings, they are so solid. The emotion, the acting, the
One of the things
sets.
I was going to say when you were talking about it, and especially compared to Harry Potter, is um, Lord of the Rings is one of those rare situations that the movies, in my opinion, the movies are better than the books.
Yes.
It's the books are amazing. I love the books. I've read them many, many times. Love a lot of stuff about Tolkien's, but it doesn't about Tolkien. But Tolkien is really great as far as history and story and concept and different things like that. But yeah, it doesn't naturally come across. It doesn't emote the same way when I read it. And it never did. Like it wasn't an emotional absorb you. You like with the dialogue and the emotion and the character and that sort of thing in the same way. But yeah, it did fill your imagination with the world and the concepts so I love it, but a very different reason. And then the movies take that and add the emotion and add the character and the that passion and stuff. One of the things I use as an example of that is when Gandalf falls. And if you read the scene in the book when Gandalf falls in Moria, it is word for word. Like,
Fly,
he
you
runs
fools.
and yeah, when he says fly you fools and all that stuff, that happens. And when you read it in the book, it just, it's something that happens. But in the movie, it's so emotional and so just like the way that Ian McKellen
Well,
acted it and
yeah,
the music and the slow motion
no, yeah,
afterwards.
that
And
music set the tone. That
it's
was
just
one thing
done
about
so
the
well.
films. The films had an incredible musical score, and that was one thing that I did miss in the Rings of Power is they did not have a really good musical score.
Which
Now,
is interesting.
there
Now,
was
who did the musical score? Was it Howard Shore that did the musical score to the original ones?
yes.
So Howard Shore did the theme for the Rings of Power. I don't know if he's doing the rest of the music, but I noticed that in the credits is that it's
Well,
a,
I will
it's
say
a main
that
theme by Howard Shore.
the closing credits of episode 2, the very beginning of the closing credits was really, really good. And you know how it always goes to a thing where it's like, okay, you now we're going to start this video in 3, 4, 2,
Right.
1 seconds, right? I tried twice to watch the closing credits because I wanted to
Wanted to
listen
hear
to
the
them
music.
because I wanted to listen, and it wouldn't let me. Amazon would
Yeah.
not let me go back to just watch the credits. It was really
You know what?
frustrating.
Something else is weird about Amazon. This is just a slight tangent for a second. when I load Amazon Prime on my TV through the app, Rings of Power is not there. I have both times to watch both episodes, I had to search for it. And yeah, they're advertising. Like if you go to Amazon.com on your computer, it's splashed all over the page and advertised. But when I went to Amazon Prime on my TV app, it was nowhere to be found. And I was like, that's really weird. I had to search
That is
for it.
really weird because when before on my TV, we both, you click on it and it's before you just hover over to the Amazon Prime app, and right above it would show the Rings of Power. So I don't know what's going on yours.
Well,
but
yeah,
it
and I
definitely
do.
showed on mine.
That is in the main TV bar. Yeah, it's a Samsung TV, which I think is what you have too, right? In the main bar, there was an advertisement for Rings of Power. But when you actually clicked on the Amazon app and went into it, then I got my continue watching, and then movies, and then TV shows and stuff you like. And I'm
so it
going
didn't even
through
show
these.
up on the banner. It didn't even show up on the banner at the
and
top.
it might have eventually, because there's like 7 or 8 things on the banner, and so maybe eventually it would have rolled through if I'd waited. But yeah, just like I would think that it would be the main banner that came up and nothing else. It'd just be like, at least for the first couple of days or something where they. I thought it was interesting. Anyway.
Okay, so I have to bring this up really quickly. Compare, and I know you probably haven't watched it, but compare the continuity between Lord of the Rings and Rings of Power to Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. They were very much alike, the House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. They did a very good job at keeping the continuity there.
Yeah, you're right. You're right that I haven't seen. I've seen parts of Game of Thrones things here and there, but what I've seen commentary and people saying the same thing, so I'm aware of that.
Yeah. So I mean, I wish that they would have paid better attention to that. In the Star Wars sequels, what's his bucket was saying that he really wanted the look and the feel of Star Wars in the films.
J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, but he did a crappy, they were stupid, crappy.
Some of the
makes me so mad.
Some of the look and feel stuff, though, some of the look and feel stuff, I think he succeeded on, though. If you compare The Force Awakens look and feel wise to the prequels, it's heads and tails better as far as look and feel goes. It's heads and tails
better than the prequels, but it was still not good enough. And then you go and he didn't have anything to do with Rogue One. And why they did not take the guys who made Rogue One to make every other Star Wars film after that is beyond me, because when they did Rogue One, it looked like Star Wars, it felt like Star Wars, it sounded like Star Wars. It was Star Wars. And then they go, especially the end, that whole ending when Darth Vader is just taking those rebels to task in that hallway was so awesome. And it was a perfect segue into A New Hope. It was awesome.
Right. Except for the CGI for Leia, which could have been better.
Oh, my gosh. The little smirk on her face was like, slap, slap. Just, that's not the way Leia was. Anyway, so... But
Star Wars actually does it speaks to what I'm talking about, because I cannot help but wonder. I think I have a good head on my shoulders about this because I'm not as passionate about some of this as other people are. And so, like, one of the things that we've talked about before is, like, you hated certain things with Star Wars that I didn't hate. So you hated The Last Jedi. And I was kind of more like, it was okay. Like, I didn't hate it. Like, I saw some problems or whatever. Now, I've come to dislike it a lot more. Like, I think you've had sway on me, over me, and you've convinced me a lot of things.
Yes.
But the other thing one of the things I judge on whether I really like something or not is based on repeat viewing. And that's one of the reasons why my opinions changed on that and The Rise of Skywalker. I can't even get through The Rise of Skywalker because it's just, I know you haven't seen it, but it's just like, it's not good. It's not because of the destruction of Luke Skywalker's character or or some of the other complaints, it's not like the original Star Wars or whatever. It's just like there's just bad writing. There's just things in it that just aren't good.
Well,
And,
all of the characters in these sequels are completely forgettable.
right, yeah. But in The Rise of Skywalker, like, sorry, not The Rise of Skywalker, the other one, the Last Jedi, one of the big complaints that people have and why they hate it so much is because of the destruction of Luke Skywalker's character. So the question is that I think is interesting is if you took it out of Luke Skywalker and all the sentiment that people had about Luke Skywalker, is it really bad in that regard? And I don't know if you should. I'm not saying you should take it out of that. I'm just saying if, as an experiment, if you took that out of that, is it actually really badly written and a bad movie in that regard? Or is that just related to this, nerddom sentiment, childhood, you're ruining my childhood sort of thing?
Now, there is so much more that is so bad in that movie. There's just, it
I
goes
agree.
way beyond
We talked
Luke.
about the side quest where they go to the casino, and it's even if you just take the CGI where they're writing those
Vegas in space. I mean, come on.
yeah.
It just
and they're
looked
writing those
way-
animals and smashing through the casinos and stuff. It was just poorly executed. Yeah, it just wasn't good.
It was really bad.
But anyway,
that
the point,
did not seem like Star Wars to me.
the point I'm getting at though is when you take a property that's a known beloved property, there's this extra pressure, right? That you have to meet, not only make a good movie, but then you also have to meet these expectations and standards that fans have of their childhood and their memories and stuff. And I don't even know if that's possible, because I think
It is
objectively,
possible. They did it with Rogue One. The fans, trust me, I know people who are deeply, deeply into Star Wars. I think you know this.
yeah.
And the absolute, I know of nobody that dislikes Rogue One. They love
Except me.
Rogue One.
I don't
No,
dislike it. I'm just
you
kidding. I just don't
compare
like it as much as you do. Yeah,
You
I like
compare
it, but
if you compare it to all of the sequels and all of the prequels, Rogue One is the only one that stands up to the standard that was set in
it's
the
one of
original
the closest.
trilogy.
Yeah, for sure. In
And
fact, the only
that's
thing
why-
I don't like about Rogue One, and the reason why I say I don't like it is just because
All the characters
I
die.
don't like the characters as well, and then they kill the characters off. So there's less of that sense of, one of the things I love about the original trilogy is the characters. Like, you love Luke, Leia, and Han. You love Chewie. You love Lando Calrissian.
yeah.
You love 3PO and R2
Yeah.
even in those. Like, you love
Yep.
the characters.
You
and Rogue
even
One
love
was okay,
Nien
but
Noom. Nien Noom.
whoever that is.
In Return of the Jedi, he was the co-pilot in the Millennium Falcon with Lando.
Okay, all right. Right.
And the Ewoks, as a kid, I like the Ewoks, and I do see the folly and the silliness of the Ewoks as an adult.
Okay,
and I think it's
that's
ridiculous.
that's a great example of what I'm talking about. Yeah, because like I'm the same way. Like, I don't mind the Ewoks, but is that totally because it's my childhood, right? And so, like, I don't know. Like, you get these things that I see these criticisms of things. Someone who sees Return of the Jedi now and it's just like, the Ewoks so stupid. It's so stupid that these dumb little teddy bears can beat these people in armor with laser blasters.
It is really stupid.
And I kind of get it. I get the
With
point. But then
spears.
again, it never has bothered me, and it still doesn't bother me. If I watch Return of the Jedi, I still just really enjoy it. So I don't know. It just puts this whole question on criticism of, what is legitimate criticism versus what is just people moaning because they aren't getting their way with something, and they're too overly critical and they're too passionate and care. I think that's what you said, is it's people care too much or something.
Yeah, they're films, but I will say this though: I have heard of people who were older than we were when the original trilogy came out.
Uh-huh.
They were older teenagers, young adults, and they hated the Ewoks. They always thought they were silly because those Ewoks were meant for kids. And when the movie
Right.
came out, we were 12 years old. Well, I was 12, you were 11, going on 12, and it would have been cooler if we could still see things through a child's eyes,
Right.
because we probably would have
Well, and I
enjoyed
wonder,
things a lot more.
do kids feel that way about Jar Jar? Like, people that were kids when they were introduced
Little
Jar Jar,
kids,
Are they okay
how
with
do they
Jar
feel
Jar?
about him now? Yeah, how do they feel about him now?
Yeah, I think Ewoks are silly, but Jar Jar was full on stupid. Like it was really bad. And so
yeah,
anyway,
no, I hated him from the beginning.
We
so.
have basically taken over our hour now, so I think that's what we have on the Rings of Power. As a general rule, like we said, about 6 out of 10, and hopefully it'll get better. Could get worse.
6 out of 10. And see, that's why I don't watch. That's why I don't watch the critics, because I don't want anybody else swaying me on something that I'm still watching.
Yeah, which it's just, I think it's ridiculous. I think it was set up, and it was unfortunate because I think the cast and all their commentary about it did not help. Terrible idea. Hollywood's got to learn to shut their leftist casts up about going preaching this garbage about their movies. Just shut up. Don't stop talking about all the virtue signaling about your movie. It's
we
not
don't care.
good.
We pay you through our money to act, and you are supposed
care about
to
your political
entertain
opinions,
us.
yeah.
Your job is to entertain. That's what you got in the business for. So just entertain. Shut your pie holes.
So if you're seeing from all the fandom that it's terrible, if you're one of the fandom and you're in that mindset, then you'll probably agree. But if you're not, I think it's better than the implication is by the fans who are saying it's terrible and it's a betrayal of Tolkien and it's awful and everything's horrible about it. And I just don't think that's true at all. Like it's reasonably good. I'm enjoying it. We'll see how it goes. Maybe we'll come back in a couple more episodes and be like, yeah, it's terrible. So
we'll do it. We'll do another review later. Yeah.
So anyway, thanks for joining us today. And like and share and subscribe and all that good stuff. And we'll see you again on our next
Bye, everybody.
Next show. Bye.